Greetings, War Thunderers. This is Longshot with you again. And today I'll be reviewing the Ki61, the Otsu version, latest in my series of neglected or underrated fighter planes in arcade. And I'm getting straight into it. I'm climbing as hard as I can at the outset of a battle, and the first thing I'll look at are the plane's flight characteristics. For those of you with ADHD, I've provided this handy too long didn't watch link so you can get straight to the conclusion and see what I thought of this plane. Okay, I'll start out by describing this plane's main strength, and that is it's an energy fighter. Do not mistake this for a turn fighter simply because it's Japanese. It is agile, it can turn pretty well, but if you go up against Spitfires or against Zeros, they will eat your lunch. Okay, so I've done the first zoom climb. We can get an idea of who can climb at a comparable rate to us. Well, Bf109 and Ki45 are both better. Significantly better. I'm on par with a Yak 7. I believe there was a MiG-3 over there as well. Can't see it now. So in short, with the planes that you come up against, this is a good climber, but it's not the best. There are planes that will climb quicker. Now further on in this same battle, I just continued to climb and climb to try and gain that altitude advantage, and a MiG-3 is taking interest in me. So what I want to do is induce him into a dogfight, because the MiG-3 cannot dogfight at all. So I'm putting into a snap roll to avoid his head-on. Definitely do not take head-ons under any circumstances in this plane. Its 450 cals might seem good on paper, but they're absolute rubbish. Whereas the 350 cals of the MiG-3 are probably the best in the game by far. Now he's flying as a MiG-3 pilot should fly. He's avoiding a turn fight, moving away. And I'm weapon trying to chase him and forgetting that I've got combat flaps deployed, which is a bit silly. Anyway, he went into a boom and zoom attack, and here he is coming out of it, and I thought I might be able to catch him as he climbed back up. And he got his sights fixed on that B-25, which meant I could very carefully snipe him at the optimal distance for my convergence, which is 300 meters. I'll just run through a series of clips showing the ideal targets for this plane up at altitude. And basically, it's pilots who are fast asleep at the wheel. It's amazing how many there are. I've noted this before in previous videos, that there seem to be pilots who climb up here and then just are totally oblivious to their surroundings, when really the opposite should be the case, considering how few aircraft there are up here to keep track of. Your main way of killing planes with this Ki61 is basically setting them on fire. And there he goes. Do not look to rip wings off. It's basically the same guns that the MC200 has, which means they're not very good. I've chosen the tracer belt simply because it gives the most chance of setting planes on fire. I would have much preferred to use stealth, but in the games when I did, I could barely seem to hit anything. It really felt like I was just firing blanks. Mind you, the tracers often aren't much better. And that is the one big problem with this plane. It handles beautifully. It's not the best or fastest climber or in terms of just raw speed, but its agility up at altitude is pretty much second to none. It's just that, apart from these examples that I'm showing you where people held still for me and let me set them alight, so often you just struggle to do any serious damage to opponents. And if you can't kill opponents in a fighter plane, then the plane isn't doing its job. Apart from shooting dive bombers and attacking other fighters at altitude, you can hunt bombers to a limited extent. You want weak ones, like Wellingtons or this Heinkel 111, or Junker 88s if their pilots are asleep. And I've taken his gunner out so I can just sit on his tail until I set him alight. These planes don't take a lot to bring down, but be very, very careful about taking on anything that has 50 cal gunners. Here I'm very, very cautiously approaching a B-25 from underneath, so his rear gunner can't get at me. And I'll hopefully set him alight, because quite often They're not all the time, but quite often when you get a B25 burning, they don't last very long from then on. But whatever you do, do not sit on the tail of a B25. The Ki61 has terrible armour, if it has armour at all, and it has a very bad habit of catching a light. If your Ki61 is alight, it's dead. I found no way of putting out a fire once one starts. Okay, occasionally though at high altitude you will have someone who isn't fast asleep and who wants to dogfight you. In this case, at a hunk of 112 below, and a Hellcat climbing up to me as well. I'll just talk you through and explain the tactics used in dogfighting someone. Basically, I want to get him into the vertical. The hunk of 112's gone chasing someone else, so it's basically me and the Hellcat. And Hellcats are very good climbers, quite fast planes, quite good turners as well. The last thing I want to do is go into a horizontal turn fight, because his plane's quite heavy. If I can keep pulling vertical maneuvers with flaps engaged, I can get over the top of a loop much faster than he can, and that enabled me to quickly get onto his tail. When an enemy is dodging you, with this plane it's so hard to get a reliable stream of bullets on them. Oops, stuffed the rudder up there. And if you can't get a long stream of bullets onto a target, you can't kill a target in this plane. So you can outfly them to your heart's content. But it takes a long time to get enough damage to bring them down. Seems I've done something to his tail or something. He's trying to make me overshoot by pulling a barrel roll. And I'm just going to keep pulling high yo-yos over the top to avoid that. And now he's had enough and he's diving away. And there's no way I can follow him in a dive. So I have to let him go. Here's another example. This time I've got a Hellcat approaching from the right. And again I'm just maximising my height advantage before engaging, hoping he'll stall out trying to climb at me. And that's almost what happens here. And in a plane with decent firepower, that Hellcat would be dead right there. If not dead, then very seriously damaged, and I'd be able to easily nail him on the second pass. But as it was barely a flesh wound. A second volley. A critical on his elevator, so hopefully he won't be able to fight back at all. Again I'm going into the vertical before lining up the next attack. And again he is zooming away into a dive. This time I've done enough damage to actually finish him off and get the kill. But unfortunately, duels like this are few and far between. So you have to initiate combat yourself. One way is hanging around near or over their spawn, about 2 kilometers up, and try and lure people into coming up and attacking you. And occasionally, very occasionally, someone will. Far less often than used to be the case. Here are Zeros trying to come up at me. But it seems to be the meta these days for short games in arcade at Tier 3, and yet this plane gets into a lot of Tier 3 battles. And because of short games, people are just anxious to get in and into the furball and get as many kills as possible, so few people will climb. After the initial climbing race, that is. As the game goes on, everyone goes to ground level, and that's just how it is. Here I've gone into a zoom climb too quickly, and that P400 is going to get guns on me. And in the anxiety to try and get involved in some way, I put myself in that situation. So while you can play the stall fighting rope-a-dope game with this, it's difficult to do, simply because you can't knock planes down reliably. Here I'm going to try and do the same to a Hurricane. Got into a fake head-on, then with all that speed and using WEP, I'm climbing hard, knowing he'll try and nose up to get to me, and he was already climbing and therefore low on energy. That should leave him just drifting around behind my tail, unable to maneuver, and if I had cannon, he would now be dead. And I get so intent on trying to take him out, I do that. I actually died quite a few times from frustration rams in this plane. So the other thing you can do is diving attacks, or boom and zoom. Here's just a few representative samples of them. I'm sorry for the quality of this and a couple of other clips in this video. But it's very common when you're doing boom and zoom attacks to just graze your opponent, where of course cannons would get a kill. With these guns, you might get a hit or two. So it's really not a viable method. So after quite a few battles flying this, I started to get very frustrated up at altitude. I get past the initial merge, if you want to call it that, where everyone who's flown high sorts themselves out as to who's diving, who's going to dogfight on high if anyone does, going for whatever bombers I can, and then things quieten down and there's nothing to do. And I hate having nothing to do. I'm in the battle to be involved. So when this Su-2 decided to dive down through the clouds after the tickling from my guns was making him laugh too much, I thought, well, why not follow him and see if I can get involved lower down. And you can see why this plane, despite its beautiful handling characteristics, it's one of the best handling energy fighters I've seen in the game, but it's just so frustrating to fly. Not to fly, it's so frustrating if you want to get kills, basically. So anyway, now I'm down here, I'm hanging around at about 1500 meters over the perma dogfight that's at ground level, and just trying to pick out targets. You have that kind of thing where people ran themselves right in front of you, but occasionally you get something like this Hurricane who sits up in front of me as I'm coming out of a turn there. And for once the guns work. That's what gets me, it's inconsistent. It's not like they always fail to get kills. Every now and then they're brilliant. And then the very next game, or even later in that same game, you'll get just hits registered and not even criticals. And I know that happens to everyone with every plane, but with this one it's beyond a joke. Now I've already made videos for the G50 and the MC202, and they have the same issue. But there's a difference compared to this plane. They're up against planes that are lower tiered and therefore much less armoured. In fact, most of the planes I'd destroy while flying this happen to be lower tier planes. Simply because higher tier ones, you just don't have the weaponry to bring them down. And even though I'm getting a couple of kills here, most of the time it's not that easy, and in fact the ineffectiveness of this plane's ability to bring down targets at this battle rating basically means it's a fighter that can't do its job, no matter how well it flies. And that really becomes obvious at low altitude, and it's basically because you're up against a whole stack of other blue fighters who are faster and armed with cannon, and going for the same targets that you are. Which means they will get kills, and you won't. It's really quite simple mathematics. It doesn't really matter how well you fly the plane. I mean, it's great exercise in low altitude energy fighting, but you just do not have the hitting power to finish off targets when someone else is hanging around with 20mm cannon and can do it far more effectively than you. And I'll just run through a few examples of exactly that problem. So you can see that it's not just isolated instances. and you get a feel for it. So here I'm going into what I thought was a nice boom and zoom attack, but I end up in a kill train, the last place I want to be. Getting very nice shots on target after target, all of them deflection shots. But deflection shots need good weaponry to make them count. And I'm sorry to keep stressing it, but it is the #1 issue with this plane. And there really is no sugarcoating it. And again, I'm up against Bf109s and Kingcobras in the chase after this poor lowly buffalo. And once more I'm in a kill train. And yet another assist. This situation really makes you feel like you're just a spectator to the battle, rather than a participant. Here's a kill I did get, but watch how hard I had to work for it. And how dangerous this kill was. Not so much in terms of the enemy plane, where I was always, if it was just me and him, then I was always in control of this dogfight, if you can call it that. It's the friendlies who are the greatest danger here. I'm going to keep chasing him because, as we know, setting someone alight in arcade is an invitation for every man and his dog to come chasing him. And in domination, unfortunately, it doesn't get any better, because domination is, by nature, a low-level affair. There's no point in going to altitude most of the time in domination. So hanging around at about 1500 metres and diving on targets is the way to go. Here I came across a P-38 who was doing the same thing, and I managed to set him alight. And normally with a P-38 that's a very quick death sentence, but he put it straight out. And as I'd moved on looking for other targets, I wasn't impressed to see that he'd done that, so thought I'd give him another try. Nice close range, lighting him up. One of his engines is dead, now he's lost the tail control, so he's definitely going to die now. Of course someone else will put some bullets in him on the way, and I get another assist. One thing about this plane is that you can hose targets as long as you like. The guns don't jam. Once more, I've dived onto a target, only to find that I'm in a kill train again, and it's very hard shooting targets when you're on their tail. And that kind of thing happens. It gets very scary. I did not find a way of actually managing to fly that plane in domination battles effectively. Another thing with it, you can't do fast caps. You will break your propeller. So this is a low tier battle, one of the only ones I got into. It was actually quite early on when I was flying this plane, and I thought, wow, if this is how easy it is, then this is going to be pretty good. I'll just walk you through the kills that the plane achieved in this game. Hitting that SB2M from side on, and then not hanging on its tail. Moving a fair distance out before turning back for another pass at it. This guy's just flying straight, but we all know how agile SB2Ms can be if they decide to turn fight you. Once they catch a light, they tend to go boom pretty quick. So that was kill number 2. Here's a climbing I-16. and it was the simplest thing in the world just to dive in as he climbed right up in front of me. That's how not to climb a plane. So number 4, another bomber. Now this one has, being the Blenheim, it has 50 cal guns on the back, therefore it's dangerous. And I have to be very careful because he could set me alight with any stray bullet. So I'm getting off his tail very quickly. And I took a bit of damage to the wing nevertheless. On this next pass I'm coming in from the side and from underneath to try and minimise the danger from his rear gunner. Now his gunner's unconscious, so I can come back and finish him off. Okay, on to number 5. They've all been very straightforward and very easy kills so far. Which, and I must stress, this is not the normal experience in this plane. This guy actually flew his plane pretty well. Instead of just flying in a straight line and letting me light him up, he decided to turn fight as he made his way towards his target. And I'm giving him a lot of respect and flying away before I'm coming back, because I know that Bf1 is a lot better turner than my plane. Now he's fixated on a target to drop his bombs, and that lets me finish him off. Again, it was rather easy. The next one. Guy's climbing without paying attention. And Dauntless rarely last long once they catch fire. Okay. So for number 8, by this time the enemy was in dire straits and we were basically besieging their base. And this is a very simple boom and zoom. I didn't kill him or anything like it, but he was beside a cliff and decided to turn into it. And the last one. Again, a high-speed attack on a dogfighting I-16. Just trying to duck underneath, so all I can do is wing him on the way past. The loop over with elevator and rudder. And now he climbs up in front of me, which makes it rather easy. So that was 9 kills, and that was by far and away the best I was able to do with this plane. So this is the last mission I flew, and it basically sums up my experience with it. It has one thing in its favour: there's a really good dogfight in it, against another F6F. So I'm doing another snap roll to avoid a head-on, except for some reason he didn't shoot. Now he flew away. He wasn't interested in tangling with me at all. He wanted to hunt bombers. I'll just skip ahead to a point where he's coming back, because I did not have the speed to chase him, and now it's on. He didn't immediately go into a turn fight. Instead he went out, same as I was doing when I was attacking those agile bombers. In case they wanted to turn on me, I didn't want to be in close range when I performed my turn. And he's doing the same thing to me. But I'm diving after the snap roll to keep my own, to get as much acceleration as I can. And I've closed up, retracted the flaps, so now my speed's equivalent to his, and he realises that he can't get away far enough, which means he can't get another head on at me. And now we're in dogfighting range. So what's it going to do? It's going to a bit of a spiraling turn, and I'm just going to pull over the top and wait, because I believe he's going to try to climb into another attack again. So I'm just keeping above him and monitoring what he's doing. He's exposing the cockpit there for all the good that does, seeing I can't hit him. Finally. But while all that was going on, a MiG-3 and a Corsair had both crept up and were both attacking me at once. And because I'd been busy, I hadn't seen it, so I had now ambushed and caught unawares. So I'm going into a dive because I'm not flying a Zero and I can't possibly dogfight them both at once. But as I keep pulling back on the elevator, and I've got combat flaps exposed, which means I'm stopping my plane deliberately from going too fast. I cannot outrun either of those planes, they're both very quick in a dive, but I can keep holding up my speed and being elusive, hoping that throws off their aim and makes them overshoot and having to keep coming around to get another beat on me again. And now that I'm down at ground level, I'll do the same thing. I'll alternate between speeding up with web, obviously hugging the terrain as much as possible, and then opening the flaps, if I remember, and pulling the plane into fake climbs, rolls, turns, and then opening up the web again and speeding away once more. The idea is, ideally, to make them crash as the MiG-3 has already done, so now I have the Corsair on my tail only. Mind you, his 50 cals are more than enough to drop me out of the sky with one single burst if he manages to get it on me, as he almost does there. And now he too has crashed. So after all that, that was just one typical arcade Grand Strike mission, a single kill. Anyway, here are the tactics I've demonstrated in the video. You can pause it if you want to read through those in detail. I won't read them all out. And here's basically my verdict on this plane. In summary, really, the plane is overtiered. At 3.0 battle rating, you're thrown into way too many tier 3 battles, which end too quickly and which have planes that are too hard for you to kill, no matter how well you fly this plane. Basically, this plane should be a 2.3 battle rating, as indeed the American premium version is. Then it would be up against fair competition, and you'd enjoy flying it. But I can't say I found the process of flying this plane enjoyable. Nevertheless, here's my own record with it. When I started this challenge, I had only 9 kills and 7 deaths. But after the process of flying it, I'd scored another 45 kills, for another 9 deaths, at an average of about 2 kills per sortie. At its current tiering, I believe this plane would be far better in realistic battles, but in arcade it's just a fish out of water. The lack of reward for effort makes it just so frustrating to fly. This plane is now going into my hangar until such time as it has decent ammunition. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.